So without further ado, actually, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Dhia. I'm a customer success manager here at Hivebrite. It's been, I think, a year and a half, a little bit more than that. Before I used to live in Canada. So good morning for everyone watching us from Canada, or good afternoon for everyone else watching us from anywhere else. It got a little bit cold, so I came here to Paris, and that's why I joined Hivebrite, me being born in the Mediterranean parts of the world. So we also have Vinzenz today with us. Vinzenz is responsible for training and development at the Bosch Alumni Network. Before joining the IAC Berlin, Vinzenz co-hosted or co-headed Singa Deutschland, a nonprofit that works on community building and entrepreneurial education. So we can already see that Vinzenz had a lot of experience in community management. Tobias, on the other hand, with whom I did not agree at all to have the same turtlenecks and black too. So I think Tobias and I were going to joke about that after. Tobias is the head of communications and community management at the IAC Berlin. Previously, he organized communications and outreach initiatives with organizations like the PwC, the World Health Summit, and he also used to work as a music journalist. So I think we also have some talking to do around that, Tobias. So good afternoon for both of you. We're very thrilled to have you with us today. To explain a little bit our topic today, we're going to be looking at going beyond vanity metrics and understanding the true impact of your community. But just before that, understanding the true impact of your community sounds good and sounds understandable. But let's just get into vanity metrics. Tobias, can you tell us a little bit more about what vanity metrics means?
I would love to. Thank you, Dhia, and thank you, Hivebrite, for organizing this webinar and having us. As you already introduced in your brief preliminary words, I do have a little background in marketing, communications, etc. And in that line of profession, it's very tempting to look at what we call vanity metrics, or what we don't want to call vanity metrics, because they have already this this taste of vanity. And this is exactly why they are called vanity metrics. They are these sneaky numbers that make us feel good about what we are doing. This is a nice description that I found. I don't copyright it. I just found it, but I love it dearly, because they just make us feel good, as mentioned. They are nice numbers. We can pick these numbers, and we normally pick numbers that are kind of impressive. I give you in a little nutshell a few examples. We like to have visits and clicks on the homepage. We like to see how many downloads of a white paper, for example, or a similar document we have. We like to see how many followers, likes, reactions we have on social media. We like to see what kind of mentions we do get in traditional media outlets, for example. Or we see the numbers of how many people do attend a webinar like we have today. Right. These are numbers that we can count, and if the numbers are good, nice, big, we feel like we've done well. What these can say exactly about our true impact is always relative to what you want to achieve. And I think this is a topic that we want and should address today.
Exactly. And if I can also add on that point, and thank you for explaining it very briefly, I would say there are also vanity or metrics that don't necessarily bear a correlation between what you see and between the success of your organization, right? And here as an organization today, we're going to be talking about the IAC Berlin. So let's give it to Vinzenz to actually introduce the IAC Berlin for us and its mission.
Thanks, Dhia, and also thanks for having us. Don't want to bore you with too much institutional context, but I feel a few lines will be helpful to understand the case we'll be looking at in a minute. The IAC Berlin has been founded around 4.5 years ago by Robert Bosch Stiftung, which is one of the largest foundations in Europe. And through the founding, there was a twofold mandate. One was to build and curate a network of current and former grantees, staff, and partners of the foundation, with the idea to extend the impact that has been invested to with the fellowships and grants that the foundation works with. And the second idea was to say, well, if we do this network within Vorrobot Bosch Stiftung, then we shouldn't be only doing this for the Stiftung itself, but also talk with others, with the sector, with the field of philanthropy about this instrument and kind of establishing network impact-oriented networks as a tool in philanthropy. And why invest in networks at all? I guess there would have been other useful things to invest money into also back then. One reason was to say, well, with all these fellowship programs, which we have done for the past 30-ish, depends on how you count, you invest a lot of money in one person over a certain period of time with the aim to create a transformational experience. Right? After a fellowship, something is intended to be different. Mm-hmm. At the moment the fellowship is over, you lose contact, which is kind of often the standard mode of operation with foundations. And the idea was, well, we can do better there. So let's create something that extends that impact.
That's actually that looks very sounds very good to me actually as an explanation. So thank you for sharing that. So for our audience also, we're going to be talking, or we're going to be having 4 different parts into our webinar today. The first one is going to be how to plan for your community's impact, what metrics matter and why, and then we're going to be seeing a little bit about how to measure impact beyond the platform, and the platform here is the Hivebrite solution, and then how to collaborate with other departments. So continuing with you, Vinzenz, here, what kind of impact do you really want to achieve with the Bosch Alumni network that the IAC is managing?
So before, I think we talk about this whole impact box that we thought of, and I think that will be shown in a minute. There we go. I hope you can see the matrix. So before I go into some of these bullets, we don't have time for everything. I want to start with a kind of a brief disclaimer about this matrix that you see. First is that this whole topic of measuring impact is really a process for us. So we are not yet at the point where we think, and maybe we'll never be, we have the model, everything's set, we know everything, we're just operating this model and that's it. So we're really building on existing literature and also in collaboration with other academics, for example, more specifically. And recently, the Vienna University of Business and Economics. So that's one thing. We're really, this is not invented by us, but we're really learning from others there. The other is that you can see an output, an outcome, and an impact section here. And it kind of suggests a linearity, right? So this classical IOOI model of impact measurement. And we feel particularly with networks, this linear thinking is really not applicable because networks don't function in linear ways. So don't be fooled by this matrix visually. It's not meant to be linear, although it looks like that a bit. And lastly, we only have time for examples today. So these bullets are really only examples for each of the boxes, and you could have a lot more information inserted. Now coming to these points, I think the first example is quite simple. We, of course, with the activities that we create and with the activities that members of the platform create, we want to make sure that members are connected to the peers of their programs and to the peers in their sector. Mm-hmm. Why are we talking about programs? As mentioned, the foundation has a history of a lot of fellowships. We're talking of more than 100. And when this platform was started, most of these fellowship schemes and the people which ran through them were not really connected to each other. So we have a lot of islands is what we started with, and we wanted to build bridges between them. So that's kind of on the output level, something we look for when we do stuff. On the member level, again, many things could be mentioned, but I highlighted one here, which is the emotional support that members receive through being a member, through interacting with others. Why? Because if we talk about emotional support, we go beyond a transactional relationship, beyond the classical give and take. as being one of the motivations that members, that people become members in the first place. We're talking about stuff that creates the belonging, the glue that keeps the people, keeps people and members in the network. And lastly, which I think is very important to say, that the Bosch Alumni network, the case we're talking of today, is not has not a single purpose, but is actually a space for a multitude of thousands of purposes that we are accommodating here. So we don't have an agenda as a coordination team here as IAC Berlin, but we're supporting members in their contributions to society. And that's our role here in the coordination.
That's great. Maybe if I can have a takeaway from this matrix is that you do have, you're intentionally thinking about the network, about the member, and about the society. And for me, that's proactive planning. And for me, that's actually the best process that I can see in building strong, adaptive communities, which the Bosch Alumni Network is actually one of them. But away or continuing with this matrix, maybe, how do you, in reality, plan for impact?
Well, in various ways. I think, I mean, why are we planning it? Why are we talking about planning anyways? I think it's really, it's one side of a coin with measuring things. So planning by itself, I guess, is trivially, planning is never a bad idea. But if we think of what we can actually measure when we look at networks, I think we might all agree that we only can measure a fraction of what goes on. And what we measure is representative at best, and maybe we can never judge. So you only have a share of the full picture. But if you can show how you plan for things and how you thought everything through and how the interventions that you make are connected to each other, yeah, then you can show to the CEO, you can show to funders that what you do and what you create makes sense, even though you can't tell all of the stories that are out there. And I think that's really important.
That's true. Go ahead.
Can we have the matrix back? It somehow, I think, disappeared in my screen.
Sure.
There we go. Great, thank you. And I just wanted to give you a few examples. So, right, we want to make sure that people are connected. What's the way to do that? We believe that through one-on-one connections, we can have the most significant effect on this connectedness. So, for example, we offer learning exchange grants, which is a tool that allows members to visit each other, well, in pre-corona times. For example, to shadow someone in the network in their professional endeavors, or develop a project together, or whatever else. For the emotional support, to kind of run that example through a bit, what we felt was really important to think of a hosting culture on the platform really consciously. And to be honest, when this was started around 4 years ago, there was no concept of a hosting culture. And suddenly we realized, okay, we need that. You know, there was this moment when someone posted on the platform, like, who is up for a beer tonight? And that kind of post never existed before. You know, it was all professional. People shared their success stories, their opportunities, their jobs. You know, it was a bit like LinkedIn. And then this beer request came in, and it made us realize, okay, we also need this. You know, we need this non-professional engagement, this hanging out, this being together. We can't just learn and do stuff together. We also need to be together in this network, and that also needs space. So we need to think of a hosting culture on the platform to create the belonging that we need for people to not only become members but also stay members.
Yeah.
And just the last example on the impact side of things, what we felt was really important to make sure that organizations of members, we are a network of individuals, right? But these individuals are part of organizations, and these organizations should be the hosts of activities in the first place, and not so much IAC Berlin. Again, we're not really important as a host. if organizations of members become hosts, they do what they want to do in their place, in their locality, with the people they engage with. And that's how we feel we create more impact instead of IAC Berlin organizing X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I think if I can touch back point on what you said about that beer request, I think that made the community, or that made, like, let's say, the approach a little bit more explicit and a little bit more conscious of the design of this kind of interventions, obviously towards what you're planning for, which is the impactful effects of such information. And by the end of the day, Tobias, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think that the platform is a private platform, so it's definitely very, very good to have those kind of interventions. So my question to you, Tobias, here is, in reality, how does the platform support this?
Basically, the platform is, I'm looking for the really good picture, but it's like the mechanics of the network. It's not essentially the heart and soul, because that can happen everywhere. Like Vinzenz, for example, mentioned the travel grants, and what happens on the ground somewhere has nothing at all to do with the platform anymore. But the platform is the everyday go-to area where people connect, where people see each other, where people touch base. And in this means, it's a very good tool, because it's very connective and it's very transparent and interactive. So if you start small with tagging, for example, on the network level, people just get alerts when something others deem interesting for them pops up, or they can easily write messages. I mean, this is the small ABC of platforms, of course, yeah. But it's there and it works. It's like a little bit like a newsletter. It's a no-brainer, but it's super effective. So you have tagging, you have messaging, you have groups on specific topics where they can work on and exchange on something that is in their interest, that they want to pursue either on a personal level or perhaps as representative of their own organizations. And we always incentivize that again from our ends with additional initiatives, with additional inputs when we do have them. But it's super interesting to see that this is running even without us. It is running from a members-driven initiative, and it's just going along with what we're doing, where we can contribute something. And just to have a last example, there are, for example, 2 different sections, opportunities and events, that of course can be organized by the IAC Berlin and by the Bosch Alumni Network coordinators, but that can be used and initiated by the members as well. They can write an opportunity, they can open a job advertisement, they can organize events, and they can invite people to these events, again via messaging, via tagging, etc. So they can set something up and immediately bring it to the attention of people that they already know on the network, or that they don't know, that they have found on the members map, for example, where they were looking for the projects that they came from in the first place, like the programs of the foundations, or when they were looking for specific interests, or for people in specific locations, because it might be an event in a specific location when it was physical events, or on a specific topic when it's digital events. So to put it all back together, it's very handy and very connective. And this is exactly what we want to do. We want to bring people together and support them where we can, and support them supporting themselves.
That's true. So everything is decentralized. So let's say that way. Vinzenz, do you have anything to add on that question in terms of how does the platform support this?
Well, just maybe one point. I highlighted the public option here, which seems to be like a smallish feature of the platform, but I think it shouldn't be underestimated. So, for example, there was it's a while ago already. Someone from, I think Russia it was, who wanted to transform a abandoned space, like an old industrial site, into something like into a cultural place, a theater-ish thing. And that person, I mean, she had a small organization in the back, but you know, not like a significant, you know, local outreach to all relevant stakeholders. But by well, hosting some members from the network in her space, together with people from, you know, from the locality, thinking about how to do that, to turn this space into something lively and livable again. You know, she used the network and the platform to gain legitimacy with her work and her idea. You know, she could show that she has, you know, the convening power to bring an international crowd of people to her place, and use this nice platform with a public option, you know, where she could present all the information about the event, where people could sign up. So it's a little thing, but it adds up to something, you know, that creates the legitimacy for members and their activities. That's actually
a very good way to put the underestimation of things that can be public from a user perspective, but also from an admin perspective. In terms of the society, so here we talked about network, which is the output, members, which are the outcome. In terms of the society, I see that there's a dot, or there's a line that says projects. And I understand you have a lot of projects that you fund. Can you probably tell us, Vinzenz, a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can. So maybe again, reminding you of the institutional context, right? So there's this Robert Bosch Stiftung, which funds projects, right, in one or the other way, or partnerships maybe, or both. So it's not our task to double the foundation. So we're not also giving the same, we're not also granting the same way the foundation does. We're supporting member collaborations. And some of these collaborations can be framed as projects, although I think that's quite a wide term. And so projects can take very different shapes. So just to give one example, I think it also can be found online. We will share the link afterwards. There was a collaboration between, I think, 3 different members and their organizations from Portugal, Belgium, and Romania, I believe, on a toolkit for small civil society organizations to measure their impact. Today's topic. So how do you do that? If you know, are a very small team, very limited resources, and they well, modeled a bit, ran a few practice runs, involved more people, and with a platform, you can have a space where all members can access that experience and its results.
Great. That's actually a very good way to use the projects module, and for you to continue working with them on that regard. If I can maybe switch and talk about the IAC Berlin's approach to evaluate all of this. So here we've been talking about how does the platform support this. We also continue to talk about how to plan for the impact, but in reality, or concretely, what's the real approach to evaluate such an impact?
So maybe it starts with the word evaluate. I think it's kind of this idea of we're evaluating, we're measuring is only a share of what we actually do when we speak of measuring. Mm-hmm. I'll come to that in a minute and start with something practical first, which is kind of the bottom left box here. Tobias mentioned that, you know, one of these numbers that make people feel good are attendance rates. You know, this and that many people have attended the event. And when you think of a network, I wouldn't say it's an irrelevant number, but in terms of, you know, how you build the network and what kind of effects events have on the network structure, it tells you almost nothing. What is a little more interesting, I think, is to find out who actually comes. So how many people, not only how many people are coming, but how many people are meeting for the first time, and how many people are meeting again. Why is that important? If you think of a network, I mean, theoretically, you're thinking of a combination of strong and weak ties. Some people are really rooted, they have strong connections to other members. Some people have loose connections to topics and to members, to network nodes, mentioning the theory there. And both is important. And imagine these numbers, and all of these people are always the same. Always the same people are coming. Even if you have high numbers, it would say, well, the network health is not as good as it can be. So we're looking at both. How many people do you engage with for the first time, and how many do you know from before?
Okay, so you're basically sending out the survey when someone comes in and you're asking them, did you meet Tobias for the first time, or you had already talked to him before, right?
So it's a very brief survey. I mean, it can be done within 3 minutes. We send it out after every activity, and it's not the only question we ask. But there are a few more. But it's in terms of kind of measuring how many people come. It's not the same here with these two questions, but it's for us the more relevant information, because then we also understand this format produces this outcome in terms of these two factors.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Tobias, do you have sorry, Vinzenz, were you going to say anything?
I wanted to jump to the next box already, but Tobias, if you want to add, feel free.
Just a brief thing. Of course, we're super aware that we cannot and don't want to only go for this, let's say, qualitative information, and we definitely do not want to reiterate on this old, I don't want to say fight, but misunderstanding perhaps between quantitative and qualitative. So what we're trying to do is to match as much as possible the quantitative and the qualitative, because we are interested in not only numbers, but how many people do attend, for example, let's take a webinar, because we're just experiencing one. And if somebody in our network or ourselves set up a webinar and everybody is expecting that there would be 30 people, and then we do have 5, that doesn't render it a bad webinar, not at all. But of course, then we are curious, why did these people, the one part of the people, why did they come and why did the others not come? Is there perhaps something that we can deduce from it on the appeal of the topic, etc.? And then we try to bring these two things together: the numbers, of course, with what Vinzenz just elaborated on, the quality, the impact, the findings that we could deduce from there.
Yeah, if I can call it some kind of A/B testing in terms of event titles and event subjects. Vinzenz, I'll let you continue talking about what I stopped you from.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Yeah, A/B testing is a good hint. So again, that's also possible with the survey that we do. We can pretty much differentiate also between different interventions and activities, and kind of look at their success rates in the way we look at success.
And by the way, we can do that with Hivebrite as well, when we have title A or title B for an event, and see how people react there.
Yeah, true. But coming to the second section here on the outcome level, again, I mean, we're speaking of surveys, right? Or at least of interviews. I mean, some form of information flow from the members to us has to somehow be organized, and usually we do it with surveys. Although we also, I mean, have conversations, of course, on a very regular basis with members. But coming back to the emotional support, I think there are various questions you can ask to find out to what extent that actually works. And I've just inserted one example here, which is I can rely on other members when things get difficult at work. And then members kind of click to what extent they agree. And again, there are, I guess, many other questions one could ask also, depending on what kind of interventions and activities you implement in the network. But I felt it's an example which is, makes a very strong case for this, for belonging to the network. If there are people also willing to listen to my private stuff, even if they don't have anything, they're not getting anything from it in the first place. That's a pretty strong signal, that people feel attached to the role.
Yeah.
And to come back to my first point about evaluation not being really the right word, I feel, is in the last box. So one thing that we do a lot with members, I mean, again, you can operate with surveys here, and we also do that. But we feel, especially on the impact side, it really falls short of what we want to do, which is why we also have sessions with members, for example, who do projects, who host activities, and so on. And we have these most significant change inquiries. It's a tool that you can also look up online. There are, I think, shorter and longer versions of doing that. But what it allows for, A, the information not only goes to us here at IAC Berlin, which is the case with the survey. B, it's also, members learning from, members learning from each other, about their stories and their successes. But more importantly, it creates a space in which we, together with members, observe the network. And this feature of the network observes itself, I feel, is really important. I mean, the platform is part of that, right? If you look at the platform, you see what goes on. And with these sessions, you get to know what the outcomes have been, and you also get a better feeling in, sharing with each other what is actually relevant in terms of outcome. What is it that we want to work towards? So these conversations, which we have regularly, are not only there to dig up stories, but it's actually part of the impact. If you think of the network impact in circular ways, you need these feedback loops. So measuring impact and creating impact kind of, it falls into one right here.
That's actually very good. In terms, I want to probably continue talking a little bit about the society/impact box that you have. I can see in terms of collecting stories, and from my previous also talks with either you or with Tobias or both of you together, I came to understand and I came to know that there's a lot of different success stories that were shared, like even in the UN General Assemblies and things like that. Is that something that one of you can probably tell us about? And I think that probably falls under evaluating the impact and collecting those stories, right?
Collecting, definitely. Evaluating, yes, of course, but not like 100%. You were referring to a very, very nice story. It's one of my favorite stories, actually, so thanks for the hint. I did have two other examples in my backpack if we were talking success stories, but thanks for bringing this one up. It is a initiative that's called Internet for Good, and it's an African initiative that was started, I think, in September 2020. Of course, an online activity because of COVID and the whole situation. And their aim was to rewrite the narrative about the internet for young Africans, for their perspective of using it, and from an outside perspective that not often has the nicest perception when Africa and internet is being connected, because there's seemingly very often this idea of scamming, etc. So they had twofold directives. This went pretty well. They proposed this as an online activity in the Bosch Alumni Network, which meant that there would be a bit of structural and strategic coaching from our ends if wanted. They were accepted, they pulled everything through, they set it up themselves, and they had regular check-ins with us, which was super interesting because they had great ideas about how they wanted to use social media, for example, how they wanted to use meetings on the ground, of course, with keeping social distance, etc., but mixing everything up. And in the long run, it ended up with an invitation for an UNODC panel on, it was about internet crime, about security in internet, and they were invited to that panel to present there and to share their experiences. And in the end, it was not ending there, not only with this very esteemed invitation, but they got in touch on that occasion with an NGO working roughly in that direction as well. And this interaction with this NGO, nothing to do at all with the Bosch Alumni Network,
Yeah.
was so intense that this Internet for Good initiative, the people, they decided that they most likely want to found their own NGO and continue in that way. So it is way out of anything that we could have planned if we would have wanted to, but it was therefore a proof of concept that if we help the right people to do their own projects and to run it through, and whenever they have questions that we can answer or that we can connect to other people in the network that can answer that something magical will come out of it. So this is a proof definitely for us, and something that we are super happy. Like this, it's a bit like this gold mining. You just wash and wash and wash the water in the river, and eventually there's a smaller or a bigger nugget of gold.
Yeah.
And this was definitely one of those.
That's actually a great success story that you shared with us, Tobias. And also for our audience, I know that's not only that's not the only one that they shared, but we're just sharing this because of the time. So thank you again, Tobias. Since I have you talking, and since you come from a communications/marketing background, maybe I'll ask you a question about Tobias. How does he come, like as a Bosch Alumni coordinator, how does he come to partner with you as a communications department? How does that relationship work in terms of in the context of today, for example?
It depends very much on actually on it's a case to case thing, because some people are just super new to this whole topic and think they know it all because they have seen a webinar somewhere, and then realize it's not that easy out there, or they know that they are at the beginning of this process and want to get a coaching and want to get some questions answered, or it's just that they know exactly what they want to do, but they just miss out a few contacts. So it ranges from, please give us a bootstrap from the beginning on idea how we can do it, until very specific questions. And what most of the time works pretty well is to have like a a quick run through the mechanics of what you can do on your own, where you need multipliers, where you can rely on just giving out information in general, like posting something on LinkedIn, for example, or where it's just better to address people directly. And it's in the end, if you know the mechanics, it's not really a hard thing.
Sure.
You cover a lot of ground with rather easy steps. And most of the time after this process, they just say thank you very much and just apply what they learned, and then they run off on their own. And it's super nice to see that, because then their creativity kicks in and they just connect these principles with their specific background, with their specific connections, and make something work in there. And then eventually after 3 months or whatever, they check in again and say, hey, I just realized that this and that happened, and how does this resonate with you? And I do have now a super specific question, yes or not, what do you think? Or it's just an FYI, this is just what happened.
Yeah, cool. What about you, Tobias, from your perspective? How does this kind of relationships, and how does the team work with other departments, not just marketing, but anything else too, from the organization perspective?
It's a super important question that very often is being a bit left out. I mean, if you think about it, it's a no-brainer. The more people know about something, the better normally. And if it's people in valuable places, it doesn't need to be high places, but valuable places, know about it, or the better. But people often they are running their project and they're stuck so much in their project that they tend to forget they would be good to just address people in other departments, for example, and think about what do these people need. So if, for example, our Bosch Alumni Network members, they come from a specific program in the Bosch Foundation, perhaps it might be interesting to let what Bosch Foundation know about that. Or it might be interesting if you are talking about a gender-specific topic to address specific groups, not only on LinkedIn, but on the platform that they are using. So it's not a specific department. So it might just be a completely different network. It might be best on TikTok, for example. But if you don't know anybody that uses TikTok, but you feel like it should be there, and we do have the topic of XYZ and they are there, you just need to bridge to these people. But this is, as mentioned, it's rather easy mechanics, but you need to step back from running your project on normally a very tight schedule, a very tight budget, and very tight resources. Step back, take a look around and see who or what can actually do help you.
True.
So this is the answer to how we try to connect not only inside the network, but to players or multiplication people outside.
That's true. Vinzenz, is there something from your perspective that you probably would want to
add? Not on that point. I just thought if people are interested, I could also just kind of share our standard questionnaire for everyone just to have a look at. I mean, we only mentioned a few features, but not everything. And if we do have a little more time left, I could just offer an overview there. But there is a question in the
I see from Ehsan Shirazi. He says, as a digital marketer, please share more info about usages of Vanity Metrics in SEO, search engine optimization, and digital marketing. I think this is maybe for Tobias.
So about examples, how they are used, I understand it like that. So you can start with that pretty easily. If you look for example to social media, you have numbers like how many people like our channel, how many people reacted in what ways with our update, and you get rather easily first numbers. And if these numbers are better and they are getting better over time, this is a classical vanity metrics thingy. It's just, or you could say it's a quantitative assessment of what you're doing, which doesn't have this negative touch to it. That said, applied to search engine optimization, it's of course quite similar. It's most easy if you think about it like from a, let's say, web shop perspective, because there you normally have the traditional the sales funnel. It starts with how can you raise awareness for your offer. So you pull people into this funnel, and this funnel should be as smooth as possible, so that as easily as possible in the end, this first contact transfers into or translates into a buy, that they ordered something, a deal done. And afterwards you can go and continue with content marketing, for example. And these are numbers that you can super easily and very well you can measure these, you can put them into perspective, and you can improve this. You can have, for example, the A/B testing that have been already addressed. Still, this is not really as easily applied to our line of work. So we do have a big difference actually between search engine optimization, digital marketing, and the impact assessment that we are trying to do.
Yeah, something else maybe that's probably more in line with Vincent's work. Can you and this is actually a question from the Q&A. Can you tell us about the degree or the evolution of your intervention from the very beginning of the network until now, seeing that there's 5 years that went through, and that you obviously changed probably tactics and changed how you do things and how you intervene?
Yeah, definitely. I guess that would be worth a separate webinar maybe, but I'll try it in 1 or 2 minutes. So yeah, again, reminding everyone of the context when we started, right? So, 100+ of these programs, about potential 10,000 people, roughly. Nobody knows exactly. And out of some of these programs, already alumni associations had been established, around 20, I think, or so. And there was one major hub which still exists today of Robert Bosch Stiftung, offering a space for quite a significant chunk of these 10,000 people. And then IAC Berlin was started, and the task number one, I guess, was to make clear that, hey, we're not competition, we're there to support you and the work you're doing. So, on the looking at it from a theoretical point of view, the network, there were a few loose ends of, mostly insulars, a few established nodes already, a few hubs, but nothing, not a complete network of all of these people. So one was to make clear, hey, we're there to serve and strengthen you, number one. Number two was to create interventions that really bridge these silos out there. So as a default in all the stuff that I think we have been doing until maybe last year, was to say we only support activities that make sure that bridges between these silos are built. So coming back to the learning exchange runs, with a few exceptions, we did not grant learning exchanges within the same, for people coming from the same program, because we wanted to make sure everything that we invest in this network, has to serve that purpose. And where we have gone away from that for various reasons, which I think are too complicated for now. And something else was our function as IAC Berlin. So, we came in suddenly, kind of, with a lot of resources compared to the alumni associations, which are usually, they have some membership fees and, well, mostly it's maybe a bit of funding. But we definitely had more firepower, if you will. But from the early start, I think the intention was to not remain that big organization in the network, that coordinates everything, is the funnel for everything that goes on. But the idea was really to A, strengthen existing nodes, and B, build up new ones. But that took a bit until we got there, until we established the platform. Just establishing the platform, making sure that most people understand how it works and use it. Already that took some time. And I think now we've entered more recently a next phase in which we give out control even more than we've done before. So the network is really ruled by trust as much as possible, as much as it is legal, which is also a thing in Germany with non-profit law. So we really want to decentralize, as we say, even stronger than that has been in the past, and actually reduce the impact of the coordinating team here at IAC Berlin, and give coordinating power to the existing network nodes.
Yeah.
Because after all, if you think about it from the impact end, you need people who are really rooted in a field, in a sector, and that's not IAC Berlin. We're just the backbone, right? But we need people who are out there and who are closer to what goes on. So we want to give them more of the leading power in the network. Yeah.
So definitely the interventions evolved with the phases of the network and of the goals that were established in each phase.
So I can contribute to that on a smaller scale, but with a more palpable picture, perhaps, because what happens on the big picture, like Vinzenz just said, tends to happen again in a small picture as well. For example, I've been addressed was somehow, I think it was autumn last year, on a specific project that was supported by us as well, and that had a specific. It was a podcast series, and they had a specific numbers of episodes that they wanted to do, and coming to the end, they were like, this is running really well at the moment. We've gained international traction and everything, so we want to continue that. And then they asked the question that really surprised me. They were like, what should we do? And we were like, what do you want to do? I mean, it's your show, and we should ask, if we're talking anyways, how can we support you? We cannot do everything, but we can do perhaps something. At least we can talk about that. So what came out of it was a conversation where we exchanged ideas what might be interesting for this podcast, merging together our personal ideas with our professional background that everybody just has. Everybody has a different personal background and professional background. And they were like, oh, yeah, that might be interesting. That might not be so applicable. We take that, our big group that's running the project. And then it grew silent. And well, like 2 months later, they were like, we will now do this and that and that and that. We're like, awesome. That's really nice. It's not us driving your project. Why should we? It's your project. You started it. So it grew exactly like Vinzenz just pictured it, from them asking us what should we do to decentralized organization, that they got it back to their own hands.
That makes
thought about that and came up with beautiful ideas what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think we only have a few minutes left, right? And now you asked us a lot of questions, so I'll ask you a question because I'm curious. I mean, maybe it has become clear that, we are really based in the non-profit context. But I know that you also have customers from other sectors which are not non-profit. Educational clients, well, I guess they're also non-profit to a large extent. But maybe also corporates. Is there, from your experience, a difference in how people are dealing with metrics and measuring?
That's actually a good question. I'm gonna steal your answer and say we need a full webinar to talk about that. But in a nutshell, I would say, from my own portfolio, to be honest, what I've realized and what I've seen in the past few months is that the education alumni kind of communities, they tend to give more focus to vanity metrics, if I can say that, without realizing that actually it doesn't necessarily bear any correlation with the business information, or with the business goals, sorry. But I also noticed that there's not much, and this will differ between university and another, right? But there's not much communication between the top management to the alumni office, to the community manager who's managing the community of alumni. So that makes the community manager just interested about, hey, I have 10,000 comments in last year versus 5,000 comments last year. So that means my community is not working. But they don't really necessarily go to projects or go to have even those small surveys that, for example, other communities would do about, have you spoken to this guy? Have you met this guy? They don't go the extra mile that seems very simple just to have or evaluate that specific impact that they see. So basically just focusing about the high levels of things. But in the other parts, and maybe this is more interesting for corporate alumni, but also for nonprofits, is that there's always a stake of money that's put in the table to manage these communities, to hire the people doing so. They always need a specific correlation between the numbers and the impact. So that's something that I've seen in your specific community and other communities too. So maybe that's a quick difference about how they approach metrics and so on. Yeah. Great. So I think we can wrap up. Today we talked about the vanity metrics and going beyond them actually was the main purpose, and trying to plan out for your impact and to evaluate the impact and being, let's say, intentional about doing so. So we will be sending the recording of today's session to everyone who has registered, whether attended or not, and we'll be sharing this on our social networks. Thank you so much, Vinzenz, and thank you so much, Tobias, for coming with us today on the call, for being such a good client, and we'll be hopefully talking to you very, very soon. Thanks also for everyone who's been watching us.
Thank you, Dhia, for hosting this conversation. And we'll also, with the follow-up, share a few links from our end. And one of them will be to the evaluation of the Bosch Alumni networks on the 3-year building phase, where you can look up a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today and learn a little more detail.
Yeah, we also have a quick, let's say, feedback link. So we would really appreciate for you to spend a couple more minutes or 1 more minute to give us some feedback about today's topic for continuous learning.
Having a brief questionnaire at the end of a webinar is always a very good idea. We love that as well.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you for the technical support crew who made this possible from the tech end.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you very soon.
Bye.